Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My topic is very basic on rhinoplasty consultation and assessment and planning. It may become a bit boring and it requires a lot of focus and attention from your side. But don't worry, I will try and stimulate your brain on this. That's some of my contributions. Please do not circulate this picture. All the photos to be used only for your own understanding. So we'll try to cover on how to consult a patient requesting for rhinoplasty, how to ask and when to ask leading questions, what to look for in the nose, and based on that, how to propose a plan to the patient. It will also help us understand how to decide on open tip rhinoplasty or closed tip approach, or to decide what kind of osteotomy, mid-wall correction, tip correction, and more importantly, how to avoid complications and how to prevent medico-legal problems. There are two kinds of approach in aesthetic surgery, be it rhinoplasty or any other surgery. One is theoretical approach, which is based on what is written in books in terms of indications, steps of examination, steps of surgery. But I believe in practical approach, which is based on primary concerns of patients, which he or she wants corrected. And this may differ from our theoretical approach. This is a very theoretical slide with classical indications for rhinoplasty. But my message here is don't just consider clinical indications for your rhinoplasty. Do also consider patient-related indications, patient's specific requirement for correction, if they want minimally invasive procedures, depending on their expectations, or if they refuse scars or they refuse bony alteration, we need to take this into consideration when deciding surgery. Let me give you a couple of examples. This patient has a lot of issues that you will see if you follow the examination pattern, from dorsum to mid-wall to tip, with retracted ala, hanging columella. But if you talk to the patient is only concerned about the bifid tip, mild asymmetry of the nostril, and some supratip depression. And she wants to retain her ethnic signs, which is mild hump and hanging columella. So this is what I did. I did a closed rhinoplasty with just correction of these three elements, and that made her happy. What she really wanted was only to correct the dent. Now I could have offered her filler injection of fat grafting, but she does not want the nose to look bigger. So I went and did a closed rhinoplasty, removing some cartilage from the tip and then using it as a graft and then correcting the dome. So the point is, consultation is very important to understand what patient is expecting. And I strongly believe consultation is as good an art as surgery is. And that's why I have this structure of consultation that I follow. There is first consultation, where it is about breaking the ice or introducing yourself to the patient, counseling the patient. Then there is a cooling off period where the patient goes home, thinks about it, comes back for a second consultation for detailed discussion. And then there are third consultation for final planning, for any more concerns or for pre-operative workup. If there is a fourth consultation, it's a red flag to me, which means either I have not understood the problem completely or the patient has not clearly understood what I can offer to the patient. So the first consultation involves these following things. The first most important is the waiting room experience. When the patient comes in and they're filling up the data sheet, it helps us to understand the psychic, the temperament and attitude towards the medical practice. A red flag is indicated when the patient is angry, annoyed, impatient and complaining. Then breaking the ice. When patient comes in, he or she is nervous, unsure of their decision, they are scared. Often they are reluctant to speak. Likewise, the surgeon is reluctant because the surgeon does not know the patient, does not know what's coming. So the best way to break the ice, to break the barrier, is to give a warm welcome with respect, smile and direct eye contact. That just releases that barrier and allows the patient to freely speak. After that, patient listening is the key. And while you are listening to what patient has to say, you are recording the detail. Often the patient will come up with their primary concerns, but there are many patients who do not speak much. If they do not speak much, then you can ask leading questions about their primary concerns. You can even point out to the areas or the region of the nose and ask them if they have any concern in these areas. While you're discussing or while you're listening, you're also understanding the expectation of the patient. The expectation could be just minimal, where the patient says, I want a very minimal change with very natural look. On the other hand, you may have patients who may show you a picture and they say that they're expecting the nose to really look very slim or to have a particular appearance. And that's so important to understand at this stage of consultation. Then you will go into the medical background, asking all the detailed medical history of the patient, and then examination of the patient. At the end, you explain the patient in details on a piece of paper along with illustrations, and I prefer to do that, and I use the patient's own file to explain to them. And more you explain at this stage, more the patient will recollect later on, and you can use this as a reference even 3 months, 6 months, 1 year down the line. And the explanation should include the following: what are the deformities, asymmetries, disproportions the patient have, whether that concerns the patient or do not concern them, and what are the procedure options to treat these patients. It could include no treatment at all, where you refuse the surgery, where you say first priority is not to do any surgery, or you offer a simpler solution like a filler injection or a fat grafting, or you may give a closed rhinoplasty approach with minimal correction, or a full septorhinoplasty. Then you need to explain the pros and cons of each procedure. If you do filler, what are the advantages? It's non-surgical, quick, minimal risk. Disadvantages: it is not long term, it may last for 1 or 2 years. If you're doing a closed rhinoplasty, again a simple procedure, but it may not correct everything that the patient wants. Then at the end, you give your recommendation to the patient as per his or her expectations. So you tell the patient that, look, based on your expectation, I feel that you need a full open tip rhinoplasty, or I feel that you should just do filler injection that will solve the problem without much risks. Then you have to explain the limitations of the procedure and explain specific complications and side effects. At the end, I always tell the patient that there are chances that you may be dissatisfied with the surgery, and the reasons for dissatisfaction could be: 1, it is undercorrected, where you still have a residual hump or the nose still look thicker, or it's overcorrected, where the nose is scooped out or the tip is overly rotated. And if this happens, what are the options that I can offer you later on, or what are the things that we can do to improve that? Then patient is handed over a written document which covers all the details, and I take acknowledgement of this document that they have received it, because it is their responsibility to go home and go through it so that they can ask more questions. At this stage, it is also important to explain them about the costs. Either you do it or one of your staff member does it, but you explain about what does the cost cover, what is excluded and additional cost of those exclusions, what happens when additional procedure or consumables are required, who will pay for that. Then there is second consultation, but it's important to have a cooling period between the first and second consultation. In fact, it's a medical regulation in UAE where we have to wait for 48 to 72 hours before a second consultation. You cannot do the surgery the next day. And often in second consultation, patient will come up with a list of questionnaires, queries, concerns, and doubt that you need to explain to them. And at this stage, you explain the patient the detail of their journey, including preoperative visit, intraoperative and post-surgical protocol. So you will explain when you come exactly what you will do. When you come, I will take your blood pressure, or the nurses will take your blood pressure. I will do the measurement. We will take photographs. I will make a written plan of the surgery. We will give you medications. Then on the day of the surgery, I will see you before the surgery. I will do marking and drawing. If you have any questions at that stage, you can even ask at that stage. Then during the surgery, I will use local infiltration. I will make an incision in the columella. I will expose the dorsum, I will do the correction of dorsum, I will do mid-wall correction, I will do tip correction, so on and so forth. And then post-operatively, when you wake up, you will have a splint on the nose, you will have a nasal pad, so you may find it difficult to breathe. Now, it is very important to explain this, and I do that for every surgery, and I've been doing this for last 15 years without fail. So I know that I have explained to the patient, my staff knows that. So eventually, if there is a discussion with the patient, I can always go back and tell them that, look, this is what I explain to every patient, and like I have explained it to you. Then you may require to show some before and after photos to these patients. Now it's very important to see the reaction when you show them before and after photos. There may be one reaction where the patient may say, there's not much difference, or the patient actually looked better pre-operatively, or they consistently see, I don't like this result for every little case. That's a red flag for you. On the other hand, there is a patient who will say, okay, that's a good difference. Oh yeah, I like that, it's very natural. Oh wow, that's a nice result. Oh, that's good. These are encouraging patients. Then you also explain to them all kinds of uneven scars that can happen, healing problems that can happen, the bruising that can happen, and this helps the patient to make a well-informed decision. And then at this stage, you may do some form of simulation. Then the third consultation either is further discussion, or there is more clarification, or sometimes it is just negotiation, financial negotiation. Or in many times, it may be a preoperative visit after the surgery is agreed and finalized, and then you are doing a final medical checkup. So you do a thorough physical examination. This is where I do a structured worksheet planning. I do the measurements, I note down the plan. So my surgical plan is ready at this stage. I will take the consent of the patient at this stage. I will do photographic documentation, so I have enough time to review the photos before the surgery, and then provide them with written instructions on what to do post-operatively on post-operative care. Now, a slide about consent. Now, where I practice in UAE, we have a law, medical law, where we have to take a two-step process of informed consent with signed copies that is issued to the patient and relatives. One is a full informed consent that is done much before the day of the surgery. It cannot be on the day of the surgery. And that includes a diagnosis with primary concerns and bodily changes, the nature of surgery or treatment you are providing, alternative methods that you have explained, like filler, closed rhinoplasty, or not doing any surgery at all, risk and benefits of the treatments, prognosis if the procedure is not performed, relative chances of success or failure, potential deformities, and if there is a need for secondary surgeries. So all of these needs to be explained by the surgeon in presence of witness, which is preferably both from patient side and from surgeon side, and all the parties sign the consent at the same time. Then the second consent is on the day of the surgery. This is just a 1.5 paper consent form with lists complications and benefits. From here on, we'll move on to the assessment of nose. And I must inform you that it's going to be, it'll stir your brain up. So I suggest you take a cup of coffee, sit down and just go through this presentation. You may want to come back to this presentation later on, again and again, just have a better grip of the information. 10.7.5 is a very interesting concept, and I've added 4 to it, and I'll tell you what it is about. So this is an evidence-based nasal analysis that was published by Rod Rorich in an open forum, which is available for everybody. And it says these are the 10 elements that you must see in the frontal position. And these are the analysis that you have to do. Don't worry about reading it now, or you can take your time to read, but I will go through each one of it. These are the 7 elements that you need to see in the profile view with the analysis. These are the 5 elements in the basal view with their analysis, and the one that I've added are these 4 elements that you need to see intranasally. So let's see the first one. The first one is facial proportion. This may sound a cliche to start looking for proportions first, but it gives us a lot of information. The horizontal third will tell us how long the nose is or how short it is and what is the relationship with the chin. and I prefer to do that both in frontal and the lateral view. The vertical fifth gives us the dimension of the nose, the width of the nose as compared to the intercanthal distance or the eye fissure length. But of course, the most important thing is the symmetry and of the whole face. So I actually do it physically when I examine the patient, and later on the photo to draw a line and see the symmetry of the face. Then look at the skin quality. Now, what's important in skin quality? It is important to understand what kind of skin the patient has. For example, this patient has thin skin with very thin mass and thick cartilages that is visible through the skin. So what does this mean is, if you're doing an open tip rhinoplasty, you need to do your dissection subperichondrial and subperiosteal. So you leave enough layer on the skin to prevent damage to the skin, and also whatever work you do underneath should look regular and uniform externally. Then you have patients who have thick skin and thick mass, and some of these have very thick cartilages. How to identify that? You can pinch the nose of the tip, and many a times you can pinch it away from the cartilage, or you can feel the thickness of the soft tissue here. But to confirm, you can evert the nostril using, of course, a non-sharp instrument and look at the edge of the lower lateral cartilage and the undersurface of the cartilage. That will give you an idea about the thickness and the strength of the lower lateral cartilage. For example, in this patient, it's mostly soft tissue, very atrophied lower lateral cartilage, and when you evert, you will not see a clear margin or edge, or the undersurface will be ill-defined. And this is another type of patient which is sebaceous skin, acne prone. You need to be aware of, and you need to treat the acne or sebaceous cyst prior to the surgery. Otherwise, they will have acne infections underneath the splint that you use. Now, rest of the examination, when I examine the patient, I actually look at what is lying underneath. I look at the nasal bones, I look at the upper lateral cartilage, I'm imagining the lower lateral cartilage, and I even actually separate them to understand what's happening to each of these elements, to the nasal bones, to the LLC, to the ULC, soft tissue, piriform aperture, etc. So let's see how we do that. The third thing that you look at is the symmetry of the nose. And it's very interesting, when you draw a line, midline, you will see some element of asymmetry. For example, in this patient, you can see there is a soft tissue bulge on one side more than the other side, which may often get missed if there is a casual look to the patient. In this patient, if you see, the whole nose is straight, the nasal bones, upper lateral cartilages are fine, but there is asymmetry in the nostril, and there is a notching in the nostril. Then you look for any deviation. If there is deviation, what are you actually looking for is, what is the structure underneath and what is the position of those structures. They are obviously deviated, but they may be asymmetrical. They may be the nasal bone asymmetry. There may be asymmetry in the upper lateral cartilage. There may be asymmetry in the lower lateral cartilage. And just correcting or straightening the septum may not correct these asymmetries. And that's why some of the patients may not get perfectly symmetrical result if you ignore these differences. Then in a patient of a C, it could be a C deviation or a reverse C deviation. Again, imagine the underlying direction on position of the nasal bones. It could be deviated, and it could be asymmetrical. Upper lateral cartilage, you can see one side is more bulging than the other side. Lower lateral cartilage being deflected on the other side, and thus it will also cause asymmetry of the nostrils. And then if there is S-shaped deviation, again you look at each of these elements to understand what's going on underneath apart from deviation in the septum. So once you have seen the asymmetry, then you go, or the deviation, then you go at the dorsal aesthetic lines. Now, dorsal aesthetic line is a line from superciliary ridges to the lateral projections of lower lateral cartilage, and it is in the form of two diverging concave lines. But the modern concept says that it is polygonal, and you will see it is true for people who have very thin skin or Caucasian type nose, where the wider part of the nose is the keystone area, and many patients prefers to keep this characteristic. They do not like the typical C or the diverging dorsal aesthetic lines. So let's forget about the polygonal lines for now. Let's look at the diverging dorsal aesthetic lines and how it gives us the diagnosis of underlying problem. For example, in this patient, you will see a reasonably good dorsal aesthetic line, except that the tip is quite wide and there is some soft tissue asymmetry you can see on both the sides. Then in this patient, one side dorsal aesthetic line is good, but the other side there is a break in the lower part, and that's because of asymmetry in the upper lateral cartilage, maybe because of underlying deviation in the septum. And the tip is quite broad. In this patient, again, you will see there is break. One side there is a little break, but more obvious break on the other side with an inverted V deformity. And in this patient, you will see the dorsal aesthetic line is not diverging, but it is parallel and it is deviated. And this is very obvious. This is usually seen in patients operated with silicone implant or any kind of implant, or even with rib cartilage graft. Then you look at the nasal bones. Now just focus at the nasal bones. And when you're looking at the nasal bone externally, just imagine the internal structure. And the internal structure, of course, is the nasal bone, but also the maxillary process of the nasal form, which forms the base of the nose, and the perpendicular pate of the ethmoid. So when you're looking at the width of the nose, you don't not only look at the base, but also look at the dorsum. And I'll show you the significance of this. Then you look at if there is any asymmetry in the nasal bones. And like I said, in deviated noses, there is often asymmetry in the nasal bones. One side will be longer than the other side. Then you look whether the nasal bones is long or short. And this contributes to the shape of the nose. A long nasal bone will have a plunging tip nose. A short nasal bone will have an over-rotated tip. So let's see at different bony vaults. Let's see in this patient, just focus on the bony vault. It looks pretty normal. In this patient, it is quite wide, and the width is both at the base, which is the maxillary process or the nasal process of the maxillary bone, and the dorsum as well is wide, apart from being asymmetrical. Whereas in this patient, the base is normal, but the dorsum is wide. So here the patient, the top patient needs a medial osteotomy to narrow here, but will also need a lateral osteotomy to correct both the width. Whereas in this patient may not need an osteotomy to narrow, but will need removal of these bony spurs on the dorsum. Then, like I said, in the deviated nose, you will see for the asymmetry, one side of the nasal bone is longer than the other, and often you need to correct this or shorten the longer side so you have better symmetry. Or there may be more concavity on one side and convexity on the other side, and that needs to be corrected by asymmetrical or multiple osteotomies. And with long nose, you cannot shorten the nasal bone, but you know at least the long nose contributes to the projection of the nose and to the rotation of the nose. And short nasal bone causes over rotation of the nose. And in this patient, you will see the nasal bone is hardly present and the mid vault is completely collapsed. Now you focus on the mid vault of the patient. The mid vault consists of upper lateral cartilage and the septal cartilage. But remember, the most important thing in the mid vault is the internal sphincter. And it is not a tent shaped structure, it is a tabletop appearance where the upper lateral cartilage joins the septum with an angle that forms the top of the table, and the septum itself is wider dorsally than the body of the septum. So that gives a tabletop appearance to the mid vault, and that allows for a good internal sphincter function. Often when you're doing hump reduction or resecting this part, if you ignore this, you end up with a tent shaped dorsum that can cause an inverted V deformity and also functional deformity. So you need to use spreader grafts to give a tabletop appearance here. Now let's look at some of the mid vault. Just focus on the mid vault. What do you see in the mid vault in this patient? You can see here again, it's pinched, it's narrow, it's almost collapsed, and because of that, obviously the internal sphincter is collapsed. So what you need to do is you need to put spreader grafts on both the sides to create a tabletop to improve the airway. Whereas in this patient, you will see the mid vault is asymmetrical. There is convexity on one side, there is concavity on the other side. And if you imagine the cartilage is also convex on one side. That may be because of the deviated septum that is pushing it, but inherently the upper lateral cartilage may be convex on this side and convex or concave on the other side, or the soft tissue may be thicker on this side and thinner on that side. So just straightening the nose may not correct these asymmetries. Now in this patient, you will see that the upper lateral cartilage is completely collapsed here on one side, more on one side than on the other side. So what you need to do is you need to support the upper lateral cartilage by putting a bigger or wider spreader graft, maybe on both the side, but a wider one on one side than on the other side. This patient, the mid vault is probably completely atrophied. It can happen either in an operated patient, a post septoplasty patient, or past infection, or just congenital like Binder syndrome, where the upper lateral cartilage is completely attenuated and thinned with obliterated angle or the internal sphincters. Now let's focus on the nasal tip. The nasal tip is formed by the lower lateral cartilage and the anterior septal angle with overlying soft tissue layer. We also need to see how it contributes to the ala of the nostril. So now let's focus on the lower lateral cartilage and how does it contribute to the elements of the tip. The foot plate actually is not the part of the columella. Foot plate projects into the nostril and it gives shape to the nostril more than just to the columella. The medial crus actually forms the body of the cannula of the columella. The intermediate crus forms the infratip lobule, and the dome forms the tip lobule. Now lateral crus, although it forms part of the tip, it's very interesting to know that lateral crus has some contribution to the ala, and it forms the external sphincter by supporting the ala, and we will see more in details later. So let's look at different type of nasal tips. Now what do you see in this nasal tip? You see that the upper lateral cartilage is very thick, wide and convex with thick overlying soft tissue and probably also thick skin. So if you're correcting, you need to correct at least the two elements to thin the tip of the nose. What do you see in this patient? The tip is more boxy, and where the the lower lateral cartilages are separated with a ligament, a loose ligament, and it's not connected together. Now you will also need to learn about the direction, knowing the direction of the lower lateral cartilage, and I'll explain to you in a while. Then you have this tip where it is asymmetrical tip, where the dome is different on one side than on the other side. This is a post-operative patient. So you can see the upper lateral cartilage, part of it has been removed. The lower lateral cartilage, part of it has been removed on one side, more on one side than on the other side. That is causing asymmetry of the tip and asymmetry of the nostril as well. So that's probably the condition of the lower lateral cartilage inside. So if you want to correct this tip, you need to add support to the lower lateral cartilage on both the sides and to create a dome symmetrically. Now a pinched nose is because like I explained to you, the lateral crus is not contributing to the ala. That part has been removed surgically. So this is a surgical patient, a post-surgical patient, and this can be diagnosed very well if you ask the patient to forcefully inhale. So you will see that the external sphincter of this patient is collapsed because of excessive resection of the lateral part of the lateral crus. Now let's understand the alar rim. So here you will understand the tip and the alar rim both together. Now there are two important things here. One is the lateral crus inclination and the contribution of lateral crus to the formation of the alar rim. An average angulation of the lateral crus is towards the outer canthus, so that partly contributes to the ala. In many patients, it is cranially rotated or the angle is very acute. And if it is cranially rotated, then it does not support the ala, which means the ala in these patients could be wide, broad, with lot of flaring, and there may also be retraction of the ala with columellar show. So if you need to correct this, you need to change the direction of the lateral crus to be able to give more support to the alar rim. Whereas in other patient, it is more obtuse, where the lower lateral cartilage or the lateral crus significantly contributes to the ala, thus giving shape to the ala. And you will see this more in North Indians or in Caucasian patients. The second thing is the lateral crus resting angle, which means how is the lateral crus resting on the upper lateral cartilage. So the plane of upper lateral cartilage is AB and the plane of the lateral crus is BC. So this angle contributes to the tip position. More obtuse, if it is more than 150, the tip will drop down and the supratip area will be obliterated. If it is more acute, the tip is lifted up with a nice supra-tip break point. And this is what we try to create intraoperatively in many patients, and you need to know the suture techniques to be able to increase or reduce the lateral crus resting angle. So let's look at different alar rims now. What do you see in this patient? The alar rim is nice gull shaped and symmetrical because the lateral crus has a normal direction towards the outer canthus and it is symmetrical. Whereas in this patient, you will see that the seagull or the gull shape is asymmetrical because the lateral crus on one side is more cranially rotated, it is pointing towards the mid pupil, and the other side it is pointing towards the lateral canthus or lateral limbus, and that also causes a retraction of the alar rim. Whereas in this patient, again you will see that the gull shape is asymmetrical with retraction and nostril show, and that is again because of the direction of the lateral crus. So lateral crus here is quite cranially rotated almost towards the medial canthus, whereas here it's almost mid-pupillary, causing significant shortening of the ala or retraction of the ala, and this will have, patient will have more nostril show and columellar show. So you know to correct what you need to do. This is the facet of the alar rim. Facet is the contraction of the soft tissue triangle. Most often happens in post-surgery patient, post-operative patients. Then you look at the alar base. Now alar base width ideally should be equal to the intercanthal distance. And many a times you will see in patients the alar width is actually equal to intercanthal distance, but there is still extra alar tissue that is flaring out. So that is called alar flare. So there is a difference between alar width and alar flare. Patients may have wide alar width and alar flare. Patients may have normal alar width with more alar flare. This is important to understand what kind of alar reduction you need to do. Now you look at the profile view. So there are 7 cardinal points that you need to see. The first one is nasofrontal angle and the radix. So what is radix? Radix is the concave part of the dorsum, and the radix may be high, like in this patient, usually who have a big hump or long nose or prominent frontal bone or the glabellar part, or the radix may be low with flat nasal bones and flat frontal bone. Then nasion, as you know, is nasofrontal suture line, whereas celion is the soft tissue point of the nasion. Then you look at the nasofrontal angle. So the nasofrontal angle will be acute if the glabella or the frontal bone is prominent and or there is a big nasal hump. It will be obtuse if the frontal bone is flatter or the nasal bone is also flatter. Then you look at the nasion. So nasion is the height of the nasal bone. So a high nasal nasion is patient with high nasal bone, and a low nasion is with a flatter low nasion length or height. Then you look at the nasal length, the dorsum and the supratip. So nasal length is the distance between the nasofrontal line or the nasion to the tip defining point or the dome. Below the dome is the infratip lobule area. So this is actually the length of the nose. So for example, this patient has long nose, this patient has short nose or rotated nose. This is a derotated nose. Then this patient has a typical hump, so it makes the nasal length look apparently longer. This patient has a scooped or ski slope nose that makes the nose look shorter. And then supratip area is the break point between the upper lateral cartilage and the lower lateral cartilage. If there is fullness in this supratip area, it is called polybeak appearance, and I will show you that. Now let's look at the various kind of dorsum or the hump deformities. Now this is a patient who has nasal bone hump, purely bony hump. The cartilage is not humped. So if you just need to correct the nasal bone hump, you don't need to open the mid-vault. You can directly rasp or chisel this bone. Unless you are shortening the whole nose, then you need to open the roof of the nose. This is the patient who has a hump on the keystone area. Proximally the nasal bone is fine, the nasion is fine, and the distally middle vault is fine. So again here you don't need to open the whole roof, you can just chisel or rasp the keystone area. Whereas this patient, the bone is fine, but the cartilage is convex or there is a cartilaginous hump. So you definitely need to open the dorsum or separate componently to reduce the hump. This is the patient who has combination of both nasal hump and cartilaginous hump. So it requires the complete hump reduction of the nasal bone and component separation of the mid-vault and resection of the septum and the upper lateral cartilage maybe. But you will have patients sometimes with a hump and a supratip depression. Now if you just reduce the hump in this patient, the patient will have a scooped appearance of the nose. So in this patient you need to fill up the supratip depression. And when the hump is in the supratip area or on the supratip area, this is called polybeak deformity. Now let's understand the tip projection. So tip projection is in relationship with the dorsum. So this patient has under projected tip. This patient has under projected tip because of the hump of the nose. This patient, although the tip is underneath the hump, although it looks like an under projected nose, but if you just improve the projection of the tip, the nose will look too long. So in this patient you need to reduce the hump to be able to have a normally projected tip. Whereas in these two patients you will see over projected tip which is going beyond the dorsal line. So either in this patient you augment the dorsum and or you shorten the height of the or the projection of the tip. Now what is tip rotation? It is the nasolabial angle. More obtuse the angle, more rotated the tip is, and as you go clockwise, the rotation reduces. For example, here the nasolabial angle is about 90 degrees. Here the nasolabial angle is more acute, so this is called under rotated or derotated tip. And the last patient is severely derotated tip or plunging tip, where the nasolabial angle is acute. Now this is very important relationship that we need to examine in each and every patient. If you miss this alar columellar relationship, often you will find deformities or asymmetries post-operatively, and the patient will come back pointing to those problems. So let's understand this very well. Now this patient has a retracted ala now with a columellar show. Now why it is not a hanging columella? What happens if you correct this columella? You will have shortening of the nose because this is a straight columella, it is not convex, and the retraction is more proximally or towards the tip. So if you need to correct this, you need to put a graft in this nostril rim to correct this, but not to shorten the columella. The second patient has ala retraction which is present all over the ala. So the whole ala is short, you can see, as compared to this patient, and it is retracted. Although there is columellar show, but this is not hanging columella. So you do not correct the columella here. You lengthen or release the ala to reduce the columellar show. This is called faucet or soft triangle contraction, and this is often in post-surgical patients where the ella overall is normal or slightly overhanging, but there is a retraction of the soft triangle. Whereas these two patients have hanging ella, or there may be some element of retracted columella. But the classic of hanging ella is it is more chubby. It does not have enough of lateral cartilage supporting the ella, and there is absence of LR groove as compared to these previous patients. If you see, they all have a well-defined LR groove, but these two patients have absent or ill-defined LR groove. Now in these patients here, you will see the first patient, you will see the ella is normal, but there is still columellar show because of convex columella. So this is hanging columella. So here you do not lengthen the ella, you shorten the columella. Whereas the next patient has some amount of retracted ella and also convexity of the columella, so giving a columellar show. Now this is, remember, often a characteristic of Arabic patients, and most of these patients like to retain this characteristic. So make sure before you try and correct it whether the patient wants it to be corrected or not. Then the third patient, again you will see there is a retraction of the ella with convex columella, but the retraction is more proximally. So here you can correct the columellar show and also put a graft to reduce the ella retraction. Then finally, periapical hypoplasia and lip-chin relationship. So periapical hypoplasia is the nasomaxillary hypoplasia, and lip-chin relationship is the nose and the chin relationship in terms of projection of the chin and the length of the chin. Now focus on the 5 basal view. First, most important is the nasal projection, and let's understand what gives nasal projection. One, of course, the columella, which is formed by the medial crus, as we know now. Then the middle crus or the intermediate crus, which forms the infratip lobule. Then the tip lobule formed by the tip defining points, which is the dome of the lower lateral cartilage, the supratip area, and the infratip break point. And always assess that in lateral position to see the infratip lobule projection, the dome projection, and the supratip defining point. Now let's look at the different nasal projection. So the first patient, you will see it is under projected nose because of short columella and because of ill-defined tip. The second patient also has a short columella and a very wide lobular tip. So the columellar and the lobule ratio is also altered here, where the lobule is bigger than the columella. In the third patient, the columella is bigger than the lobule. In the fourth patient, you see the lobule is missing. It's only the columella that's visible. So if you are improving here, you need to create lobule, infratip lobule, to give a good definition. And also you will see the lateral crus of this patient is convex as compared to this patient, the previous one, which is more concave. Then you focus on the nostril. Now, what contributes to the symmetry and asymmetry of the nostril? For example, this patient has fairly symmetrical nostril. Now, this patient has asymmetry of the nostril, but if you measure, the width will be equal. So the asymmetry is because of the dome, which is underdefined on the right side as compared to the left side. So when you correct the dome, you will automatically correct the asymmetry of the nostril. Whereas this patient, you will see the nostril is very narrow and long, and you will see that the lateral crus is quite concave, collapsing the external sphincter. Then in this patient is typical wide and short nostril, and again because of under projection of the tip. So instead of directly resecting the ella, you would improve the projection of the tip, and that will automatically improve the width of the ella. This patient has significantly asymmetrical nostril, again not because of the nostril itself, but because of the lower lateral cartilage. where the dome is asymmetrical, the lateral crus on each side is asymmetrical, and the columellar or the medial crus itself is deflected. Whereas in this patient, interesting also to see is the nostril and the tip ratio. The nostril is very small and the tip is very wide, and the midline scar indicates a technique where people make a vertical incision to insert an implant, which I do not or strongly condemn it, because it makes it difficult to do any correction. If you have to do open tip rhinoplasty, to plan an incision is a bit challenging in these patients. Then you focus on the columella, the LR base and the LR flaring. So you will see in this patient, obviously the nostril looks asymmetrical because the LR is quite symmetrical. The LR flaring is very mild, but the asymmetry is because of the caudal septal deviation that is projecting into the nostril. Same thing in this patient, you will see that the caudal septum is projected into one of the nostrils. In this patient, it is the medial or the foot plate of the lower lateral cartilage that is projecting in the nostril, making the nostril look asymmetrical. But you also look at the columella, which is deflected, LR base, which is symmetrical, LR flaring or the convexity of the lateral crus more on one side as compared to the other side. And in this patient, you will see that there is flaring of the medial crus or the foot plate of the crus. Then finally, you look at the intranasal area. There are 4 things to look for. The turbinates, particularly the middle and the inferior turbinate, which contributes to the airway. So either you or your ENT colleague will make a plan on what sort of procedure to be done to correct the turbinate hypertrophy. Then you focus on the septum. So you focus on all elements of septum. The anterior septum, which is formed by the septal cartilage, what kind of deviation and how it is contributing to the tip and the columella. The posterior deviation, whether it is extending to the ethmoid bone. So if you need to correct that, you need to go that far. Then inferiorly onto the vomer, if there is any vomer or the vomer itself is deviated to one side, then you need to correct that part as well. Then also look for the mucosa, quality of the mucosa, any evidence of any perforation or synechia, which may often happen without patient telling you or giving you the history. Now you know the internal and the external nasal valve. The internal nasal valve was the angle of the upper lateral cartilage with the septum, and the external nasal wall is the lateral crus and the LR tissue. So to test this, you can put a cotton bud inside and do a Cottel's test by gently lifting the upper lateral cartilage and asking the patient to breathe. Same thing you can do for externally by lifting the LR, asking the patient to breathe. If there is improvement in breathing, then the Cottel test is positive, which means that these valves needs surgical correction. Now let's see how to put all of this together. So I have this assessment system, I think, which will be very useful. Let's go through this quickly. So these are the 10 areas, 10 elements that you have to look for. Quickly look for the proportion, and you will see in this patient the nose looks shorter than the lower part, and if you see in the profile, there will be, and she has a history of chin implant, so there is a displaced chin implant. Then you look at the skin quality. This patient has thick skin, and the patient, yes, is concerned about it. So I have told the patient that post-operatively she may need some steroid injections, but result may be still unpredictable, as we don't know how much skin will shrink. Then you look at the symmetry. You will see that there is more bulge on one side than on the other side. That needs to be corrected. Then you see the tip defining points, and you will see how different they are. So tip defining points are basically light reflexes. The domal reflex, the infralobule break point, and the supratip break point. So you know that you need to create the dome and create this tip defining points. Then you look at the dorsal aesthetic line, which is fairly okay, except that it is wide in the lower part. Then you look at the mid-vault, the nasal tip, LR rim, the relationship, and if there is any alteration required, you make a plan here, proposed plan, and explain the challenges to the patient. Then the LR width. So you see how much of width and how much of LR flaring there is. And in the lateral view, you look at the nasofrontal angle and the radix, which is fairly normal in this patient. You look at the nasal length, dorsum and the supratip, and you will see that the nasal height is more in this patient. So you need to reduce that to give a aesthetic nose, and that affects the supratip area, which is full in this patient. So you need to improve the supratip area and improve the tip projection. As you can see, it is under projected tip. Then you look at the tip rotation, and the tip rotation is a little bit obtuse, so you have to be careful that you don't make the tip more rotated. That will increase the nostril show. Then you look at the periapical. There is a LR retraction, you can notice that. So if you don't correct or don't warn the patient, this may get exaggerated post-operatively. Then you notice that she has kind of a hanging LR, and there is no definition with absent LR groove. So during the surgery, you can remove some soft tissue to improve the aesthetics of the LR region. Then you see the chin is less projected, but vertically it's long. So the implant has been deviated and displaced inferiorly. So we need to bring the implant forward. Then you look at the nasal projection. So here again, the nostril and the columnar ratio, the tip and the columnar ratio, the tip is wide, bulbous. Then LR width, flaring, and intranasal examination. Once you have done that, then you will make a surgical plan, and there are a lot of these materials available in literature where you can have a sheet for yourself and do this pre-operatively. So you have a good record post-operatively as well. So the bottom line is, whenever you're examining the patient, you need to examine the underlying pathology, understand the underlying pathology, and correlate it clinically. So once you have done that, it will be easy for you to correct and improve the appearance of the nose. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please do not forget to like, subscribe, and recommend to your friends. Thank you very much.